Chapter 100, Collaboration. All in all, the research community doesn't take the news well. I don't understand how the professor can be okay with this. Artem paces around Red's room, more riled up than Red's ever seen the older researcher. The mood is infectious, and even while keeping his psychic senses to himself, Red struggles to stay seated and just let his legs bounce. It's not that he's okay with it, it's just that he can't overturn the champion on his own. Not when it comes to safety from Pokemon. Since when did research fall under that? Red raises a brow. Since the research involved potentially creating Pokemon. Artem pauses in his pacing, opens his mouth, closes it, scowls, and resumes pacing as he mutters, "We were being careful." We were, sure. Not that it wasn't cool to see the idea catch on and spread like that, but once others started doing it, there's no way everyone was. So you agree with the decision? Didn't say that. Red runs a hand through his hair. It would be one thing if we knew for sure that Unknown could create Pokemon, but continually fail to understand or replicate it. It's not like he hasn't had plenty of experience with that. But suspecting without being able to test, Red grimaces as the wordless frustration spreads through his chest. Artem sighs and nods before resuming his pacing, and Red tries to focus on what he should do now. If the origin of Pokemon is really just another type of Pokemon, Red's work would be far from over, since the obvious next question would be where Unknown come from. But at least he'd have a direction to look in. It would make all the other avenues that have been hovering at the back of his thoughts, abiogenesis, natural selection, panspermia, discardable, freeing up thought and research time toward an avenue with an actual expectation of answers somewhere along the path. Figuring out where one creature comes from, no matter how unusual, is a very different thing from figuring out where the thousands of others do. In truth, though, with his partition down, Red is more conflicted than he lets on. With full access to all his memories, the news that research would be restricted due to potential danger makes him think of his own secrets. They may not fall as cleanly into the champion's purview. The Saki, maybe, but the rest would likely be a civilian matter. But it does show that people like Lance are willing to keep potentially dangerous truths from being known. It should make him feel better, particularly when he remembers his response to Giovanni that day, after being asked what it would take for Red to hide a discovery on the origin of species. If someone learned how to make their own Pokemon, for example, they might create a legendary, or a dozen. His own words make it hard not to understand the champion's perspective. But Artem doesn't seem to be in the mood for a real discussion just yet, which is understandable given he spent so much time on the Unknown experiment just to be told he can't continue it. Still, sitting here being gloomy about it won't help anything. On the plus side, there's no ban on experimenting with Metamon. Artem pauses in his pacing and turns to Red, frown shifting as his lip twitches upward. You mean Ditto? Metamon is the better name, Red insists. Ditto already means something. So does Far-Fetched, but context makes it clear what people mean. Well, Professor Oak says Metamon. Artem rolls his eyes. I swear if this turns into another barrier situation. Hey, we're not Unova. Sorry, Leaf. And Metamon isn't nearly as bad as Mr. Mime. I don't care how bad the name is. I just want it to be consistent. I get it, but name quality matters too. If we leave everything to popular preference, we're more likely to get stupid names, like Surfetched. Wait, what would you call it? Absurd. All right, that is better, but Metamon isn't. Is too. And, he goes on before they get caught in a loop. The fact that they can transform into any Pokemon opens a lot of questions about their biology that might still teach us something about Pokemon. It's hard not to get excited about that. Sure, but we'll have to wait for those who have one to discover everything. He eyes Red. Unless the professor. Red's fledgling optimism fades as he shakes his head. There are only a couple dozen that were captured, and they're all being very carefully distributed. The lab has one, of course, but... Artem sighs and keeps pacing. Red is a little relieved his friend didn't ask why Red isn't there already. It's been a while since Red felt torn about his decision not to work at Palette Labs. Now that he's got some original research under his belt, and more citations than nearly any other first-year researcher, the idea of going home feels less unearned. though he still feels annoyed by how that happened, even after the churned-out correlation studies ended up being a bit useful. He's been back many times since the day he learned free teleportation, and the more often he goes, the more he finds himself missing the clean halls, constant sound of friendly debate in the cafeteria, and easy access to the various experts all working on their own interesting things. He could be satisfied, he thinks, accepting a junior position there, and knowing it wouldn't just be from nepotism, but it would still be a junior position, helping others in their research. Sure, he'd have a voice at the table, and knows the others there well enough to be fairly confident his thoughts will be respected. In a way, it would be a dream come true, just not the dream. And he doesn't need to be at the lab to send them his ideas, which he's already done. Instead, he has to pursue the ideas that he's uniquely suited to, create new opportunities in the field that those in the labs can't. You know, Red says after a moment as he pulls his phone out to check the announcement again. This says no one's allowed to experiment with unown creating Pokemon, but it doesn't say we can't study them at all. What, are you suddenly fascinated by the sounds they make? No, but I'm also not trying to sneak around the ban either. I was just thinking, what would I want to do if we discover that the unown do create Pokemon? Right, find out where the unown come from. But what new info do we have to figure that out? Not new info, but the network is still there. We've been using them to track unown movements, and they took it upon themselves to try monitoring for a biogenesis. I bet they're as frustrated as we are, but still interested in doing something meaningful if they can. We should give them a new direction before they move on to something else. Artem's pacing slows, face thoughtful. Something besides tracking them, you mean? We've gotten lots of good data from that, but it's the kind of work that requires hundreds of people all contributing data little by little, nothing active or exciting. And we still don't have any insights from it yet, other than confirming that they originate and congregate at ruins. Yeah, and we can't follow them beyond the regions to check if there are others in the wilderness, but we might be able to tell if we find enough psychics willing to camp out at ruins and monitor any that appear. You think what? They're the same ones leaving the regions and teleporting back. Either that, or the number of unown in the world is rapidly increasing, and has been for years. It's not absurd to think of, but it would be good to test both ideas if we can. So the psychics monitor memories of the appearing unown, while others go along for recording and protection? Artem scratches the light stubble growing along his jaw. Yeah, maybe. We could also... Red's heart jumps into his throat as their phones buzz, the sound impossible to mistake for anything else. Before he can take his out to check the notification, Artem already has his in hand. Tier 1 east of Pewter. Some trouble coming down from Mount Moon. He looks at Red, not needing to ask the question. He knows Red has been there and so can teleport over. With so many trainers busy on Cinnabar Island, or recovering from the battles there, the rest of Indigo has rallied to help at the various incidents that have popped up in the days following. Psychic trainers who can freely teleport have been in particularly high demand, as CoreNet has struggled from the lack of able trainers to spare sending extra to Tier 1s, especially since, with many of the strongest trainers in the region kept busy, the Tier 2s have needed more quantity to make up for the weaker participants, which is why in the past week, Red has assisted with 2 different Tier 1 incidents and 1 Tier 2. He's mostly been acting as support, but still battled his share of wilds at each, and saw his share of casualties. I should go, he says, throat dry. Artem nods and hurries to gather his things, and Red pulls up his checklist to make sure he doesn't forget anything. I'll start scouting for interest. His friend sounds guilty, and Red knows he'd come if he could. Maybe see if there's a few people in WCN who have explored any ruins before. Sounds good. Energized electronics, crammed canteens, pouch of Pokeballs. His travel bag hasn't seen much use since Lavender, but maybe he should put a battle bag together for sudden incidents. I'll make a post about it once I get back. Cool. Artem is standing by the door, shifting his weight. I'll be nearby, probably. See you soon, then. Right, be careful, yeah? Red forces a smile. I'll try. Artem nods, closes the door, and Red is alone. He closes his eyes, skin flushing hot and cold, and quickly summons his Ivysaur before he lets himself drop onto his bed, taking deep breaths as he stares between his feet, anxiety and dread swirling through his stomach and up his chest. Some days, when his depression is bad enough, it can get hard to remember all the ways he's improved over the past few months. Other times, however, it's very clear how much easier it is for him to function without his partition up. He even occasionally thinks he's close to being truly healed, or at least no longer really debilitated by his grief. Until last week. It was the first time he didn't have his partition up when an incident alert came. The first time he had to decide whether to go into a dangerous situation or not, with the full weight of his memories quickly helping him imagine everything that could go wrong. The resulting panic attack quickly disabused him of the idea that he'd gotten through the worst of Aiko's death. As his Ivysaur walks over and presses against his legs, Red feels himself curling into a ball, whole body drenched in sweat as he forces his breathing to stay a steady, even cycle. He tries to ground himself, first in his body, then in his setting, eyes moving over everything he sees, hears, feels. I'm sitting on my bed. I don't need to leave. Nothing is attacking me. His Ivysaur's bulb is close to his face, and Red takes a deep breath of the unique scent, using it as yet another grounding point and reminder that he's safe. One of the first things he did when he got Ivysaur and Wartortle was spend some time with Blue and Leaf, learning from their experiences with their own Pokémon. But before buying them, he also researched what unique value he might have access to, both as a psychic and for his own different goals and lifestyle than theirs. His collaboration with the What Comes Next group in Celadon gave him the idea of aromatherapy. He reaches down to stroke behind his Pokemon's ears, and Ivysaur gurgles happily as it settles against him. He'd like to bring Pikachu out too, but while much more cuddly, the mouse is also more attuned to Red's stress, and got very twitchy during his last panic attack. So he just sits with his Ivysaur for a while, waiting until the feeling of safety is more concrete and he can breathe easier. It takes a few minutes before he feels more solid and present in his body, but the ball of anxious dread is still in his stomach, and the thought of getting up to go to the Tier 1 makes it spread, disrupting his breaths for another few cycles. If it was just a risk of danger, Red's pretty sure he would be able to talk himself into going. What really keeps him paralyzed is the idea that he might be put in another situation where he has to make an impossible choice. Memories of Aiko running ahead of him, of Leaf's shock and Blue's anger, crowd his thoughts, and it's hard not to just bring his partition back up. He can get through this if he gives his less traumatized self more control. With the partition up, it's so much easier to be optimistic, to just not think of those possibilities and focus on what he wants or needs to do. But that's a solution from his less integrated days. If he gives up control now, his partitioned self would probably suggest he try working it out anyway, unless Red amnesias this whole incident, which he's not willing to do. Partitioned Red would notice something off anyway. He can hide the emotions, but not his body's lingering reaction to them. It's a relief to be on the same side, even if they still disagree about things. Sometimes partitioned Red will even do things like read guidelines used by firefighters for determining safety levels for burning buildings, or emergency triage protocols. Both for the knowledge and because he knows his unpartitioned self cares about it. More than that, while sometimes it can trigger stressful memories or what-ifs to read about life and death scenarios, when his partition is up and he's just experiencing things through it, the overall experience of reading guidelines the professionals use is actually rather soothing. It also opened up opportunities, according to Dr. Seward. Once Red feels a bit more grounded again, he takes his phone out and plays one of the recordings from past him with his partition up. Hey Red, if you're listening to this one, it's probably because you're feeling stressed about another tough choice you might have to make. He remembers nudging his partitioned self to keep things vague in case he ever needs to listen to these around others. Maybe just thinking about what people will think of you, in general. I get it. I mean, I don't get it as much as you do right now, but I remember those feelings too, and they suck. He hears his past self sigh. It's okay to be scared of making the wrong call, or being shunned for whatever choices you make when all the options suck. I can't promise it'll be okay, but just try to remember why we're doing this, all right? It's because we can make a difference. We've done it before, saved a lot of lives, prevented more cracks in the world. Maybe someday it will make more sense for us to be like Bill, but we're also learning too much from field work to give it up now. Remember Lavender? That sucked too, but how much further back would we be if we hadn't been there? Not to mention what might have happened to the others. We developed Sidar because we had to during the storm. The twisted ball in his stomach relaxes little by little as Red listens to more examples, things that were harder to remember when his mind was crowded by all the potential bad outcomes. He even smiles as his past self mentions that they wouldn't even know they were psychic if they hadn't been blasted by their spinnerack. End of the day, just focus on what you can decide when you can decide it. Remember what Giovanni said about allowing himself to be human? Whatever you're struggling with right now, maybe not doing it is the right answer. Maybe doing it is, but in a certain way that some others won't understand. Whatever the case, as long as you can keep learning from the decisions, that's what matters most. And, no matter what you decide, you know that some people will always be on your side. Mom, the professor, Dr. Seward, Leaf, probably, Sabrina too, and probably Giovanni. But Partitioned Red doesn't know about why that would be, and it's enough to be reminded that the category of people exist at all. And me, I may not always understand because, the amnesia. But whatever we deal with, we'll do it together. Good luck. Red lets out a long breath as the knot finishes unraveling until it's just a weight in his stomach. He still dreads what's ahead, but it doesn't feel like more than he can handle, or like it will automatically end in catastrophe. Aware that every minute passing is another he could be helping at the incident, Red still takes a moment to gather his thoughts and introspect on whether he wants to respond in some way. Dr. Seward said writing would let him remember things more clearly, voice was the most convenient and added more emotional data, and video was the least convenient but maximized the potential impact. So he starts a video recording and aims the camera at himself, trying to push down his self-consciousness and muster a smile. Hey Red, if you're listening to this one, you're, probably wondering if you'll ever feel better about whatever's stressing you out right now. I just want you to know, whatever you feel, you probably have a good reason to feel it. It's okay to be worried. But you're going to feel better. It just happened to me. It'll happen to you too. Oh, and Partitioned Red, if you're listening to this, to remember what it was like to feel panicked, so you can make another recording that might help. The mention of people who will stick by us was really good. There are some others too, so feel free to just say that. And others too, as an extra reminder, in case I'm further gone next time. I know that probably feels annoyingly mysterious, but you get it. Thanks again, for everything. Red ends the recording, gives it a name, then takes another deep breath and feeds Ivysaur a puffin before withdrawing him and grabbing his hat on the way out. Leaf smiles as she sees the dots appear in the distant sky, hand tilting her hat to keep the setting sun out of her eyes. The flying Pokemon and their riders quickly grow as she watches, and she waves once they're close enough for her to make out who's who. Blue and Elaine are in the front, and wave back before starting their descent to the trainer house roof. It's amazing seeing how big Zephyr has gotten, particularly since he and Crimson used to be the same size. Leaf thinks her Pidgeotto is close to evolving after a particularly intense battle south of Fuchsia yesterday, but she's not sure Crimson will catch up anytime soon unless things get worse around here. Nearly 2 weeks after the battle at Cinnabar City, most of the Fuchsia gym members are still helping reclaim the island, which means more and more locals have been called on to help the Rangers. She's in the city too often not to help out when she can, though thankfully that's only meant a couple battles so far. Each lost life feels extra harsh, with her project underway, and each day that passes before it finishes feels heavier. She grips her hat tight as Blue and the others land, waiting for the buffeting wind to fade before she runs over to hug them as they dismount. Welcome to Fuchsia. You weren't kidding. The safari is beautiful. Elaine looks back out toward the wilderness to the northeast as her hands move automatically to unsaddle her mount. We saw so many Pokemon as we flew over, whole herds of Tauros and a family of Kangaskhan, and I think I saw a Dragonair in one of the far lakes. You said there's a chance we'll be able to get admission at some point? Maria asks. It's been a while since Leaf saw her without her big floppy hat, but she seems to be trying out sunglasses as a new fashion choice, which, when combined with her dark clothes and flying helmet, makes her look like the world's youngest and cutest member of a biker gang. I think it's especially likely now, assuming the project stays in the sweet spot, well, kind of bitter spot, of needing more support, without losing so many rangers to other duties that it's put entirely on hold. Leaf holds her hat again as Glenn and a couple of people she doesn't recognize descend, then gives him a hug once he hops down. "Glad you could make it," she says, happy as always to see him moving so much more smoothly these days. "Not getting left behind just yet," he says with a distractingly charming grin. "I thought field tests would still be a ways off," Blue asks as he finishes caring for Zephyr and withdraws him. "Before, yeah, but our timelines also got thrown up in the air. What with the new Pokemon? The fact that they turned the second half of her birthday into a tense and frightening night and caused horrifying amounts of Pokemon and human death didn't stop part of her from getting excited about the possibilities Ditto Metamon might represent. They copy the Pokemon's natural instincts, but not its conditioning. She texted natural as the information on them trickled out. Not just one type of Pokemon, every Pokemon they transform into. If we can figure out how, maybe we can code it." It was early morning for him, which is normally when he would still be asleep, but he'd been as glued to the news feed as her. "We need a copy of its Pokeball data from someone that caught one. They might not release that to the public. Then we'll get it another way. Maybe the project will have enough pull to get a copy." And so it did, a new wing being formed specifically to focus on the new Pokemon's potential application to their goal. It was staffed by an even broader pool of talented programmers, who coordinated with various labs and other organizations, trying to learn more about them, not to mention figure out how to train them. The Rangers were even able to secure a specimen for the team to examine, on occasion. Natural in particular went into a frenzy once he got a copy of the Ditto's code, though he wasn't on that team, being a relative unknown who kept his personal life private. Leaf was uneasy about that, and considered asking him how he got the code, but after what she trusted him with following the incident, she's not sure she's one to throw stones. In truth, she was more worried about the way his sleep schedule seemed to shift later and later each day as he obsessed over the new Pokemon. But other than basic check-ins, she's had too many other things on her plate to also start managing how others use their time. Like her plan to uncover the Fuchsia Ninja Clan, assuming it exists. After walking the city and talking to locals didn't get her anywhere, she decided the best way to find Laura's informant, or at least someone who might work with them, is to set a trap. Her reasoning is simple. There's no way whoever's been regularly stopping criminal activity in Fuchsia would do so by just randomly wandering the streets and waiting until they spot something. Not unless there really is a whole clan running around the city every night, and that would make it harder to stay unnoticed. At first, she thought they must have someone inside various criminal organizations feeding them info, but that wouldn't explain the corporate crimes that get stopped too. And it's not like all major crime gets stopped. And if there's a pattern to it, it's not one Leaf or Laura could figure out. She considered reaching out to some of the gangs herself, maybe just posting on their message boards to see if anyone would be willing to talk off the record about their experiences. Laura talked her out of it, since the gang members would see it as a trap, and anyone working with the ninja who might be monitoring their forums would get tipped off that someone's looking into them. But there was nothing stopping Leaf from making a few fake accounts and leaving cryptic hints about a planned robbery. Leading to that idea was the realization that Laura's informant isn't primarily motivated to take down Sylph. The vendetta was born out of a desire to protect Fuchsia, which means they're probably more likely to react to something that could be a big enough threat to the city. In practical terms, that means a handful of potential high-value targets: government buildings, Pokemon centers, entrances to the Safari Zone, and of course, the gym. Most criminals wouldn't be crazy enough to hit the latter, and there's not much value to them in government buildings. Well, not unless it's something much higher level than the sorts of street gangs that were already chased out of the city. The Safari Zone is one option, but that might involve the Rangers, and Leaf doesn't want to set up a false crime that, if seen by anyone and reported, would waste their already limited time and resources. That doesn't leave much. A lot of valuable Pokemon might be stolen from a Pokemon Center, of course, but they have moderately high security. Same with robbing supplies from trainer markets, or any other store that might have lots of high-value items. But upstream of all of them are the warehouses that goods get shipped to when they enter the city. So Leaf spends the night with Blue's group, showing them around the city and getting to know the trainers that Blue picked up in Saffron until the sun sets and it's time to say goodnight. Instead of teleporting back, however, Leaf makes her way to one of the warehouse districts by the docks, where storage balls containing everything from Sylph merchandise to Pokemon Center supplies are being held before distribution. It only took a bit of footwork to scout out where the best vantage points to intervene in any attempted robberies would be, and after that, she just had to find a place she could set herself to watch for anyone that might use those vantage points. This turns out to be the roof of an apartment building nearby, which only takes a few minutes of fumbling with her bag outside to enter as someone else does. Once settled on the edge of the roof, she lifts her binoculars to watch the warehouse district. The city is well lit, but not in the places she needs to be watching, and so she reaches up to switch to thermal imaging. The world immediately darkens as most of the ambient light disappears, leaving a smattering of dots that glow bright white as they move from place to place. Each is a person or Pokemon, their silhouettes surprisingly sharp in contrast to their surroundings, though there are a few fire Pokemon that give off so much heat she can barely tell their species. There are also far more flying Pokemon than she would guess, and for a moment she just stares at them, zipping above the city like shooting stars. Then she turns back to her target, or at least where she thinks it should be. Some buildings are dimly visible, but many are cold, dark blocks. It takes another switch back to normal vision to make sure she's looking in the right places. Then she swaps back to thermal to settle in and watch the darkness for anything unusual. Before long, it becomes easier to find landmarks, while street lamps are stationary white pinpricks, rather than glowing illuminators for their surroundings. She can still track their positions, and any ventilation in the buildings tends to be hot enough to glow too. It's a fascinating alternative way to see the city, and she wonders with a jealous pang if this is the sort of thing Red and other psychics see when they fully merge with Pokemon that have different ways of seeing the world than humans. The thought has her summon Raph to keep her company, and once he's settled beside her, she puts one earphone in to listen to a podcast on aerial coordination maneuvers as she waits, and waits, and waits, and waits, stretching her arms one at a time, then her legs, and then waits some more. The next episode, matching Poffin flavors to different Pokemon tastes, has just started when a mechanical voice behind her says, "Leaf Juniper." She yelps and drops the binoculars, rolling onto her back and preparing to command Raph to defend her when she realizes who's standing right behind where she was perched. Leaf scrambles to her feet, pulse pounding in her ears, but the figure just stands there, watching from behind their mask, just a few inches taller than Leaf, and just as Laura described, wearing a dark outfit that makes their silhouette hard to discern. How did you... Raph, the useless lump, sniffs curiously at the newcomer, then settles back into place. You're not the only one with binoculars. Also thermal imaging, I'm guessing. The voice is disguised by the filter, but Leaf can still hear the amusement. When I saw you up here, just a single white speck sitting perfectly still for half an hour, I thought you might be a cop, or one of Sylph's people. But you're working for Laura Veris, aren't you? Claiming not to know who Laura is would be stupid. Gods, this whole thing was stupid. Laura was right, she's not ready for this sort of thing. I'm here alone. I mean on my own. I was following a tip about some criminal activity. Liar. You've been asking around the city about me. Kind of annoying given you also caught Sylph's attention with that. Or did you not consider that people who know more than random drunks might take your interest as evidence itself? Leaf swallows, not even needing to answer. She hopes her blush isn't visible through those dark goggles, but if they see infrared, then her face is probably burning like a Charizard's tail. Sorry. You'll make it up to me, the figure says with complete confidence. After all, we have the same enemy, even if you don't know it yet. This utterly fails to set Leaf at ease. We do? Oh, right. Get your head in the game, Leaf. We do. You want to take Sylph down. I want him taken down, the masked figure corrects. I don't care who does it. Thought Laura would, figured legitimate means might do the trick, but he's got too much power for that. I won't do anything Laura wouldn't, can't even. Oh, really? Would Laura have stolen data from the lab under the casino? What are you talking about? Leaf asks, after what she hopes is a just long enough pause. Her heart, which had been starting to slow a little, is kicking in her chest again like an angry ponyta. Or maybe Laura had a hand in that too. She was with you at the station, after. This is just speculation, unless... Leaf's blood turns to ice as she remembers too late that the person in front of her might be a psychic. Just because the one that ran from the police in Celadon was dark doesn't mean this is the same person. You don't have to admit to anything, the figure says, as Leaf considers a number of dramatic options for escaping, including just running past the figure. I'm just here to let you know, we can work together, if you're more careful, going forward than you have been, or else you're just likely to cause more problems for me. What do you want me to do? Leaf asks, focusing as best she can on the exercises Red taught her to throw off psychics. For now, nothing. Your investigation in Fuchsia is over, but in exchange, I have a new target for you. Leaf hesitates. Sylph? Not quite. That info that got leaked from the Celadon lab put some pieces together. I used to think there were a lot of organizations Sylph was working with and against, but now I think they might be mostly all the same one, and the relationship has been souring. What? Why would Sylph work with another organization and against it at the same time? That's what we're going to figure out. Who, exactly, Sylph's been battling in the shadows, and whether the enemy of our enemy is our friend. After his initial meeting with Sabrina, Blue expects Koga's invitation on his second day in Fuchsia to be a similarly blunt dismissal of any attempt to jump the line or alter his gym culture. From what he's seen online and heard from others, it's the most traditional gym in Indigo, and when he arrives on site, he gets that impression immediately reinforced. Even the buildings feel like a piece of ancient culture, each one built in the old style of wood and paper walls that made reconstruction easy after Pokemon attacks, with large open spaces between the administrative entrance building and the various classrooms around the compound. Between them are small ponds, rock gardens, and various types of arena. He knows there are modern training facilities underground, but the overall effect is a mix of the utilitarian Vermilion and cultivated Celadon gyms, particularly since the uniform he sees on various gym members is a dark Monsuki embroidered with the gym badge, though the ambiance is different from either. There are a few distant sounds of battle coming from various directions, but there's no drill instructors yelling orders, nor pockets of people engaged in quiet conversation. Overall, his walk toward the center of the gym feels peaceful. The leader's building is much like the others, though it's raised a little higher and looks more detailed and stylized. As he approaches, Blue pauses outside of it to watch as a pair of non-trainer gym employees clean an arena, carefully digging up sections stained with acid or toxic sludge and safely disposing them in a marked canister before replacing the arena floor with fresh soil. Some of the arenas are stone, but those would put ground types at a disadvantage, and this gym no doubt expects to see many of them from people coming prepared to counter the poison-type focus. Blue's fingers brush the balls on his belt. If Reeve evolves into a Raiden and tops into a Kadabra, he'll have a solid pair of offensive counters for Koga, and with a Magneton or two, he'll have powerful defensive counters. But it's Nin that he thinks will really be his ace. If he can get the Golbat to evolve into a Crobat, it'll be able to resist Koga's poison types while still being able to sweep. Unfortunately, he hasn't been training Nin or Reeve much since he was preparing to face Sabrina. Such an abrupt switch in focus feels strange without the payoff of having gotten a badge, but her offer was too good to pass up. He has his suspicions about whether she actually intends to experiment with Koichi's theories, or if she already knows the outcome and is just putting him to a test before she reveals what she knows. Of course, that would only make sense if there's some truth to it, unless she's just yanking his chain. But he didn't get that vibe from her. Instead, she seemed to be assessing him in a way that no other leaders have, including Erika. Whatever she has in mind for him when he returns to her gym, he has a feeling it's more than just the answer to his question and a mastery challenge. He makes his way inside the leader's building and finds himself in an entrance hall with space for boots and coats, along with a small nook with a flower pot in it. The whole area makes him feel like he's stepping into someone's home, not a leader's office. What if someone's in a rush to get from one place to another? Well, in those cases, they probably just ignore it, Right. Everything's so peaceful here that he's having trouble imagining it in a state of emergency, but at the end of the day, it is a gym, and a pretty respected one at that. Koga's held his gym longer than any other leader in Kanto besides Blaine, and like Blaine is relatively isolated compared to the rest of the leaders, making the amount of land under his protection larger than most. Fuchsia does have an unusually high concentration of rangers nearby to help with threats to the city, but most have a primary duty to the Safari Zone rather than nearby incidents, which means it's up to the gym members to form the backbone of any defense of the city and nearby towns. Koga is a man that not only commands respect, but deserves it. Blue takes a breath, preparing himself to return to the demeanor and perspective he learned in Erica's gym, turning himself into more of a refined trainer, or at least one who's able to demonstrate appropriate respect. Not that any leader is likely to put up with disrespect, but how the respect is shown matters. Finally, he knocks on the wooden portion of the door, then opens it at the enter that comes through to find Koga himself, sitting at a low table with his legs folded beneath him, tea set on another table beside him, while his attention stays focused on a laptop monitor. No receptionist, no waiting room, just a large living quarter, and a few other rooms along the walls. By most metrics of evaluating status, it's the most humble he's ever seen a gym leader. But like all the others, something about the man in front of Blue is more than what he appears. The calm strength in his posture, the sense of both focus on his work while being aware of his environment, the simple comforts of his surroundings, all reinforce Blue's knowledge that he's walked into the room of a man of power. He wonders, vaguely, when he'll start having that effect on people, and then wonders for the first time if he already does to some degree. "Welcome to Fuchsia, trainer," Koga says once Blue has closed the door behind him. "Please sit." "Thank you, leader." Blue bows his head as he sits, mirroring Koga's posture and hoping the conversation doesn't go on too long. Caesar hurts his ankles. "Tea? What kind?" "Shincha. Fresh, not stored from a previous season." As if that matters, since storage puts things in stasis anyway. Still, it's pricey stuff, and Blue bows his head again to show his thanks. "I would love some." Koga pours Blue a small cup, turning away from his computer for the first time since Blue entered. "You're resting too much weight on your legs." Once Koga puts the pot down, one hand lifts the cup toward Blue, while the other taps his own stomach, eyes meeting his. "Engage your core to hold your weight up." Blue straightens as he takes the saucer. "Like this? Less rigid, or your shoulders will soon grow tired. Do not focus on just one part of yourself. Let your awareness spread through your body, while holding your goal gently in mind, and you will find a position that feels more natural." He sips his tea as Blue tries to follow this advice, then nods and turns back to his monitor. "You can also sit zazen, if you would prefer. I know the rumors about me, but I don't judge people by things as inconsequential as that." Blue considers a moment, then says, "I might, if this starts feeling bad. For now, I want to try getting this right." Koga nods again, takes another sip of tea, then puts it down and types something out on his laptop. Blue blows on his tea as he waits, breathing in occasionally to enjoy the rich scent until the leader finishes, then closes the laptop and gives Blue his full attention. "So, are you just here for a mastery challenge, or do you have some other interest in my gym?" Blue smiles as the leader opens their conversation with a trap he prepared for. He also learned at Celadon how well a cup of tea can help give extra thinking time, and so takes a sip and runs through his prepared response before he sets the cup down. "I won't pretend I wasn't running from one badge to the next when I started my journey. And obviously, once I slowed down, it was to get more involved in Vermilion and Celadon. But at Saffron, I focused on developing myself and my Pokemon, and forming new connections. That's all I want here. If it turns out your gym has more to teach me than others, I'm open to staying longer. And if you're interested in what I've done at previous gyms, I'm of course happy to talk about that anytime." Koga's gaze is as intense as Sabrina's, and after a moment he asks, "Does that mean you would say no to an early mastery challenge?" Well, shit. It's gotta be a bluff. There's no way Koga, of all gym leaders, is going to let Blue jump straight to a badge match after just arriving. "You're skeptical, Perhaps it will help if I clarify that this is not a free offer. There is a problem I cannot solve myself and cannot ask anyone from my gym to solve. You are an outsider who may actually possess the traits and skill necessary. What I propose is a straightforward exchange. Blue hides his smile behind another sip of tea, fighting to control his excitement before he lowers his cup again. Forget the early badge challenge. There's no way he's turning down the chance to solve a problem for a gym leader. I wouldn't be opposed in principle, he says, voice level. But I'd like to hear more about the problem first. It's my daughter. Janine is intelligent, resourceful, strong-willed, and arrogant. She acts as though her position as future leader of Fuchsia is guaranteed, and yet her focus has fractured. She has neglected the duties of a potential leader for her own priorities of what a leader should be, without yet even experiencing the demands of the position. Blue listens in carefully concealed fascination, aware that he's being confided in, and unsure why. Koga doesn't strike him as the sort of man who'd share personal family drama to just anyone. How desperate is he, exactly? Respectfully, leader, couldn't you just defeat her? For another few years at least, yes. But those are years she is spending unwisely, and eventually she will have an opportunity to ascend to leadership that I will have no say in. What, you think she's going to challenge another gym leader? Perhaps, if she grows impatient enough. But we would both prefer she replace me in Fuchsia, assuming she is worthy. Koga takes another sip of tea, gaze dropping for just a moment before returning to Blue's. And my own plans are being delayed, so long as she is not. Blue blinks. You want to retire? No. You plan to ascend. How many powerful Pokemon have you been hiding exactly? He's too excited by the even juicier gossip he just got freely handed, which of course he wouldn't be sharing with anyone if he wants the positive relationship with Koga that's clearly being offered. To maintain his respectful calm, thoughts already racing over all the current Elite's teams. If you think you have a chance, I'd bet on you over Bruno and Will. The Johto psychic replaced Karen after her injury against Zapdos, and while he's strong, Koga probably has some good counters against him. Maybe Lorelei too. But you'd have to be hiding something really monstrous to beat Agatha or Lance. Koga merely watches him, brow slightly raised, and Blue grins and holds a hand up. Not that I'm actually expecting an answer. Either way, I'm looking forward to the matches. Matches that will happen sooner if I have reason to believe Janine defeating my second would be cause for celebration. Right. Blue straightens his back, feeling a mild ache on his ankles and waist, and does his best to consider the situation from Koga's perspective. So if you need me to talk to her, I've got ideas for what gyms should be more like, and would be happy to pitch her on it. But that's no guarantee, so I'm guessing it's not what you want. It also doesn't sound like you expect me to get stronger than her anytime soon, to demoralize her or whatever. If you are capable of becoming her equal, or better, and that demoralizes her, then I won't consider that a failure on your part. Blue would call that cold, but he gets it. But you don't think that's likely. No, you are a skilled trainer, but I judge Janine will still be your better for a while yet. That doesn't mean you cannot provide a decent challenge to her, however, and I may be wrong about your potential. What matters is not whether you can, however. It's whether she thinks you can. Koga pours himself more tea, then offers it to Blue, who lets him refill his cup. Especially if I make it clear I expect you to. Blue raises a brow, then finally gets it. You're going to make it seem like I'm your successor. Fuchsia's gym leader nods. I expect you to be working hard while here regardless. Combined with my public favor, I suspect she will quickly realize that you can, in fact, surpass her, and hope this will force her to reprioritize the path to leadership itself. I want her to be so busy training her Pokemon and others, bonding with gym members, studying gym logistics, all the things it takes to become a leader, that she has no time for anything else. Will you do this? To be clear, you want me to lie about my intentions here? Make it seem like I am considering staying and becoming leader? Yes, Koga says, no shame in his voice. And if Janine focuses on her gym duties again, or you beat Janine in a Pokemon battle even once, I will allow you to challenge, for mastery, of course, but also membership, if your time here does change your mind. Blue smiles. It's not quite the agreement and role he forged with Erica, but it's unique and prestigious in its own way, and he's got no objection to some deception for a good cause. Also, this would make 3 secret agreements with 3 different leaders. He may not be able to show them off, but it still feels as good as getting a badge when he repeats what he said to Sabrina. That sounds perfect, leader.
This has been an AI reading of the Pokemon fanfic, Pokemon: The Origin of Species, written by Daystar Eld. If you enjoy this work, please visit patreon.com/daystareld, where you can support the author. Additionally, if you enjoyed this podcast and wish to help support the creation of others like it, you can visit patreon.com/askwhocastsai, where we are releasing episodes 4 weeks in advance of the regular feed. Thanks for listening.